was presented by Selina Schocken and Caitlin Christensen. I am Hans Vemer, very nice to be here. I am running Concept Foundation. A few slides on Concept Foundation. We are a small non-profit, non-government organization with a collaborative agreement with the World Health Organization. We're based in Bangkok and Geneva, and we have an international group of staff and a roster of consultants. What do we do? Our mission is to ensure that low-income women all over the world have access to sexual and reproductive health products of an assured quality and at the lowest possible cost. And how do we do that? We enforce and implement Access to Medicines program. We support public-private partnerships, and we try to have a schematic and coordinated approach to product introduction of products that are pre-qualified. And after this introduction, I would like to give the floor to Jamie of the Reproductive Health Supplies Coalition and Alice Miller. Can we go to the other slide now, Jamie?
Yes, so we are going to have a presentation from Alice Miller at Financing for Development.
Okay, Alice is the Chief Financial Officer for Financing for Development and the Director of Finance and Risk Management for Pledge Guarantee for Health. She has worked in international development finance in a variety of capacities with the World Bank, USAID, and the U.S. Export-Import Bank, amongst others. Alice, go ahead.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Hans, and good morning, everybody, and thanks for being with us today. I'm going to take a few minutes just to talk about a proposed work stream that Financing for Development is considering undertaking with respect to trying to connect the dots between reproductive health suppliers and potential impact investors. So to go a little bit over the RMNCH landscape, as many people know, despite market growth in recent years, the reproductive health commodity market still doesn't represent a fully competitive landscape. There are a small number of large RMNCH suppliers who tend to dominate the market, decreasing the potential for improvements in quality, choice, and affordability. RMNCH commodities are purchased mostly by national governments, and those governments tend to focus on affordability when they're making their procurement decisions. We're trying to come up with some ideas that might improve outcomes and focusing on quality because we feel like quality needs to be part of the demand equation. So a potential solution that we're looking for is trying to, as I said, connect the dots between impact investors and emerging suppliers. Impact investors are investors that are seeking a double bottom line when they are looking for potential investment opportunities. They're looking for both financial returns and social returns. Beth Bafford of the Calvert Foundation is going to talk a little bit more about impact investing and how they look to make their investments and the kind of thought process that they go through. So I'll leave a little bit of that to her. Also, when we're looking at connecting investors with manufacturers, emerging manufacturers require investment capital in order to improve quality while maintaining affordability. Manufacturers are going to be at different points in their own development, and determining when a manufacturer is actually ready for investment is something that I think is very important for trying to connect investors with manufacturers. And we are, again, looking at some ways to try to make these connections. And how do communities benefit from manufacturers improving quality? The community gains access to quality assured goods, raising confidence in uptake of care. And these improvements in quality will, we hope, increase demand for and use of quality goods, in the RMNCH area. One of the potential solutions that we're looking for is trying to figure out a way to connect the impact investors with the manufacturers. And what we thought might be a useful way to do this would be to create a set of investment criteria based on the 4 pillars of the RHSC that could be used by the manufacturers to determine whether they're ready for investment, and also by the potential investors to determine, again, whether they think the manufacturers are ready for them to step in. What we would propose would be outcomes of creating these investment criteria would be increased capacity of suppliers who are well aligned with RHSC's core pillars, increased quality of goods through investments in advanced production machinery, testing, and qualification processes, increased competition in the entire market, resulting in more affordable prices, and increased access to a choice of quality-assured goods as national purchasers shift procurement priorities. The proposed work that F4D is putting forward would build on work already being done in this area by the GEMS Caucus, the Concept Foundation, and JPIGO, and we'd anticipate that there would be a lot of involvement with these organizations in developing and vetting the criteria. This slide kind of shows the overview of our work plan. We've basically divided it into 3 streams of work. The first of which I'm talking about today, which is to develop the investment criteria, and then to do some additional work, building on work that the RHSC has already done on identifying potential investors. And we would anticipate that this work would be done through the first half of 2015. Once we've actually been able to develop the investment criteria, there would be additional work that would need to be done to identify appropriate manufacturers that might benefit from the use of these criteria, and then to organize some investor circles where we could try to bring together potential investors with the potential investees. And then finally, once this is done, we would want to do some monitoring and evaluation. We would want to look at the criteria, look at instances where the criteria were used in investment cases, and determine whether or not they were useful. So again, to go back, the details on how we plan to do the development of these criteria, again, they would be focused on achieving RHSC's 4 strategic goals. We would see that the criteria would be used by manufacturers to plan investments in processes and procedures that would bring their production in line with those pillars. The criteria would be used by impact investors to aid in their internal assessments of potential investees. And in developing the criteria, we would have to analyze what the existing barriers are to increasing quality, achieving pre-qualification, diversifying product offerings, expanding into new markets, etc. So the criteria would be focused very clearly on trying to overcome those barriers. So the criteria would be, as I said, based on the 4 strategic goals, but would be focused very clearly on the barriers that we see in achieving those goals. And again, we would vet and curate the investment criteria both in the RHSC community and also with the potential impact investors. And then finally, part of the investment criteria, in addition to the 4 strategic goals of the RHSC, would be gender equality, environmental and legal standards of business ethics that all potential suppliers would be expected to adhere to. So looking at the 4 pillars of the RHSC and how we might align the investment criteria, to start with availability, so we would want to ensure the availability of reproductive health products and supplies from the manufacturers to the point of access. So we would want to make sure that suppliers are involved in every part of the supply chain management of purchasers and in availability and where to determine where products are actually needed. On choice, we want to make sure that suppliers are providing the end user with a broad range of choice and a broader range that's currently available in many of these markets. So this criteria would encourage suppliers to manufacture the supplies based on demand and availability to ensure a broader choice for the purchasers. And the next goal, equity, we would want manufacturers to reduce the financial and product-related barriers that hinder access to the supplies that they are manufacturing. So we would be focusing on affordability, you would be focusing on ease of use of the various products, and really trying to get manufacturers to focus on the end user. Then finally, and I think almost most importantly, the goal of quality. We want to make sure that suppliers are providing commodities that meet quality assurance levels that are very important for end users to be assured that the products that they're using are safe and effective and meet international quality criteria. So again, part of this part of the investment criteria around quality would be trying to encourage suppliers to take the steps that are necessary to either to ensure quality, either to reach WHO pre-qualification status or to meet stringent regulatory authority approval. Again, I think it's important. We'll be trying to put together some proposed criteria, but it's important that we vet these criteria and get input on the criteria from a variety of sources, including the reproductive health community at large. Again, as I mentioned, the GEMS Caucus, the Concept Foundation, and JPIGO that have already done a lot of basic work in this area that will be very helpful in producing the criteria. We also want to reach out to international procurement agencies to help with the quality piece and to touch base with country procurement authorities to make sure that the investment criteria would meet their needs. And then finally, because we are talking about a finance activity, we want to make sure that the criteria are going to be useful for financiers, impact investors and aggregators, institutional investors if you're talking about larger suppliers, commercial lenders that might be willing to actually make credit available to some of these suppliers based on the criteria, and then other development finance institutions that are concerned with helping the suppliers in this area to meet their investment goals. So again, that was an overview of phase one of the proposal. And then finally, going back a little bit to our timeline, the next phases again would be investor scoping and matching, and then finally monitoring, evaluation, and going over lessons learned. So thanks very much. That's the end of my presentation.
Great, thanks, Alice. And we're switching over to Beth right now.
Thank you. Thank you very.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alice. We now go to Beth. Beth is a director on the investments team at Calvert Foundation. Calvert Foundation is an impact investing fund where Beth focuses on lending in global health and place-based community development in the United States. She joined Calvert Foundation from McKinsey & Company, where she worked with health payers and providers to help prepare for and implement U.S. health reform. Thanks for joining us, Beth. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much, Hans, and thanks everyone for joining today. So just a quick background on Calvert Foundation first, and then I will dive into kind of the investor view that complements what Alice was just talking about nicely. So before I dive into that, just a quick overview on us. This is kind of what Calvert Foundation does. We are an impact debt provider. So we raise capital from a fixed income product through multiple channels from individuals, institutions, and faith-based organizations. We then pool that capital and lend to community and international development organizations all across the world. We've lent about $1 billion in our history, raised and lent about $1 billion in our history, and in about 80 countries and all 50 states in the U.S. So we are what Alice was calling an impact investor, and the tool that we use for our investments is debt. So that's just a little bit of background on Calvert Foundation. And so when we look at international sectors specifically, we're really looking to understand and build new markets. The impact investing community was really, I think, partly created to fill gaps in financing where the traditional markets left off, will not lend or invest capital. And so because we are filling those gaps and there's, that traditional markets are not serving, there's a bit of market building that we need to do in the process of making our investments. And so especially as we look at new sectors internationally, we look at a few things when we're doing that market building work. And the first is really where the capital needs. So this is really what Alice and F4D are trying to do, which is to really understand, throughout the manufacturing process, throughout that industry, understand, where are there gaps currently with funding. The second one is how do we organize that, and that's another part of what Alice was really talking about, which is to say, okay, we know that there are gaps that exist. They might be kind of all over the value chain. How do we organize them to understand, the pockets of needs that there are so that we can more easily fit that with capital. And then lastly, we look at how investors can collaborate to align with that demand. And so we work, we know that we can't, as one investor, we can't solve every problem. We have, limitations in the tools that we have. And so we look to partner with other investors, other organizations, thought leaders, policy organizations to really figure out a holistic solution to the supply of capital to meet the needs on the ground. And so Alice kind of laid out all of the ways that they're thinking about organizing that demand. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about how we've done this in the past to kind of organize the supply. So organize the supply of capital. And there's two examples of how we've done that in two sectors internationally. One is global health. We've done some landscaping work that I'll walk through. And the second is in the clean energy space on the household level, so looking at kind of clean cook stoves and solar electronics that can increase productivity, improve health, and help the environment in billions of households around the world. So the first example is in health. And so what we did to start, which is to really understand the activity that was going out there. So when we're talking about organizing the supply, we interviewed all of these folks that are on this page. And we spoke to them about how they were looking at global health, how they, what kinds of investments they had made in global health, what kind of tools that they used. Do they use debt? Do they use equity? Do they use grants? Is it a mix? And just trying to understand kind of their thoughts on the sector and how they were feeling about investing in health in developing countries. These folks were that we kind of organized into different stages. So, and this is, as we talk about organizing the supply. So you can see, some of these folks are doing debt, equity, or both, and that's the color of the border. And then folks are investing along different stages of companies or enterprises. And so some people are willing to take that early stage kind of seed risk on the left. The folks in the middle are really looking for companies that are or enterprises or manufacturers who are who have a couple of years under their belt, but need some capital to expand. And then lastly, there's on the right folks who are looking at kind of more mature industries and trying to really help them scale. And so it's kind of how we looked at trying to organize the capital. When we are talking about global health and trying to understand what that means in terms of what these people are investing in, we tried to bucket them out into to 6 categories of potential investments. And so for you all, the ones that are most pertinent here are the pharmaceuticals and the logistics and distribution, probably the 2 on the right. But there are obviously a lot of other activities, a lot of other enterprises and innovations happening along all sorts of different parts of the healthcare value chain. So then we were trying to, with investors as our audience, we were trying to really help investors think about, okay, if they have a certain tool and they have a certain intent of their capital, where is the best place to focus their efforts? And so we decided to break this down into a grid that really looks at what population they're trying to serve, the income levels of that population, and the geographies of that population. What are those 6 subsectors are they targeting? And then really understanding the intent or the characteristics of capital that would be useful along those in that grid, and then what the enterprise actually needs for growth. So then getting down to the granular enterprise level. And so what we did was did this in the first step was to create this market context kind of ecosystem grid to really understand the market dynamics at each point in the grid, and then we look to the actual enterprise needs and their stage of development. And so this grid, as I said, kind of has subsectors on the left. So that's the 6 buckets of health on the left. Populations served on the top. So everything from the rural bottom of the pyramid populations to the kind of urban or peri-urban high-income populations. We were focusing mostly on East Africa and India. When you look at this grid, you notice that the words in the gray boxes are the kind of market complications or market failures that exist at that intersection. So for example, in pharma, when you're looking to kind of distribute pharma to the rural bottom of the pyramid, there's obviously last mile distribution issues, there's price sensitivity, so there's the kind of limited ability or willingness to pay, and there's information asymmetry. So there's can be a kind of a lack of understanding of the need for different medicines or different commodities. So we then took this lens of kind of what are the market dynamics at each of the parts of the grid and said, okay, based on that, what kind of capital do we think is appropriate to help kind of grow or seed innovation and enterprises in those parts of the grid? And what we came up with was the sense that the majority of the stuff on the left really needs to likely, for the near term, be subsidized. So there needs some sort of grant capital in the mix to make these business models work. In the middle, the kind of the medium green, if you will, looking at places where we think impact investing and impact capital can be really important and useful because of their kind of characteristics. It tends to be more flexible capital, tends to be better terms, more creative structuring that takes a lot of different capital into play, really with the end goal of really helping the enterprise and helping that impact be created. Having that in mind the whole time. And then lastly, traditional capital. So as you guys all know, there's a lot of traditional private equity and private debt that is looking for deals that are, in health that are serving these high-income populations in these countries. And then this is just a little bit more about those characteristics and intent of the capital. And so really understanding what each type of capital is seeking, and how it is structured to suit different target beneficiaries. And then once you understand kind of the general characteristics of the capital that's needed, then you can look at the actual enterprise needs. And so in this case, we would look at the manufacturer that is looking to expand or purchase new equipment, or try to improve their quality by that needs working capital to do so, and you really look at where they are in their stage of development to make sure that the kind of capital meets, and the kind of tool meets their needs. So whether you need a grant, debt, or equity to meet those goals. The next example of when we've done this is in the clean energy space, and this was really through a women's economic empowerment lens. We did an initial portfolio of investments in organizations empowering women in the U.S. and internationally, and through that process really realized that there are a lot of needs in this kind of burgeoning field of clean appliances and household technologies that are helping to alleviate time and energy spent on food preparation and kind of home power to empower women, improve their health, improve the health of the family while improving the environment around them. And so what we did was a similar process in this case, which is that we tried to understand the organization of the demand. So understanding across the value chain, what do the manufacturers need, what do the distributors need, and what kind of financing solutions are needed for consumers to buy these products. And so we looked across that value chain and tried to figure out how we could provide financing solutions that would kind of help lift the whole chain up. And so as an example, we support EnviroFit, which is a manufacturer of clean cook stoves. We're lending to the Paradigm Project, which is a distributor of clean cook stoves. And then we look at the financing of the sales and financing of the carbon credits that are created by clean cook stoves through an organization like Bix Fund. And so this is an example of kind of the next step. So if you take the health example and we kind of organized the marketplace a little bit, then we say, okay, what are the investments we can make that will allow us to invest across that, across those needs of the marketplace? And who are the fund managers and who are the intermediaries that are doing that work that we can partner with to do it? And so in the case of clean energy and clean cook stoves, it was really to look at the different people that are active across different parts of this. And so some are doing debt capital for kind of startup venture debt for these enterprises. Some are doing growth capital. Some are doing financing for the consumers so that they can purchase these things. And so looking at all the different financing solutions that are needed and figuring out how we can take a portfolio approach to trying to meet each of those needs. And then, as I said in the beginning, it's not just us. And we really look to partner with a lot of organizations across the sector to make sure that our financing solutions are coordinated and aligned with the financing activities of other financial organizations, other impact investors, people like foundations, other financial institutions, microfinance organizations or fund managers, development finance institutions like OPIC and the European folks, working with TA providers to make sure that we're not just providing a financing solution, but that they also have business support that they need to actually grow and be successful, and then looking for alliances or partners that can help kind of organize all of this and get the word out to really continue to garner excitement and attention to what we're trying to do. And so in the case of the clean cook stoves, these are examples of the organizations we're partnering with. They bring different strengths to the table, but we think when we all work together and all coordinate, there is a much greater impact that can be created across the whole sector. And that is the end of my slideshow. And so just in sum, I think the work that is being done by F4D and in this sector is really exciting. I think that the first step is identifying the issues and identifying the gaps. And I think the willingness to try to kind of organize that demand as well as kind of reach out and bringing the investors along through that process will be really important to make sure that the the demand and the supply can be organized in a way that's fully aligned to make sure that we're able to provide the right kind of solutions to the problems that you guys are kind of developing and defining. With that, I will turn it back over to Hans.
Thank you, Beth, and thank you, Alice. These were two very interesting presentations with a different perspective on the work that we do. It's not about grants, it's not about donations, but it's really about more a business approach, investing, good business plans, etc. That was really interesting. Now the webinar will be open for Q&As, questions for clarification, questions for discussion, and Jamie will explain how that works.
Thank you, Hans. So we'd like to open up the floor to questions. You can ask a question in two ways. One is by raising your hand, clicking on the little hand icon next to your name, and then I will take you off mute and you can ask your question. The second way, and if you have a bad connection, you can use this method, is to type out your question under the question window on the GoToWebinar dashboard, and we'll receive the questions and read them out loud. So it looks like we have one question already from Selena, so I'm going to take you off mute, Selena, and you'll be able to ask the question.
Great. Thank you very much. This is absolutely fascinating. I'm Selena Shokin from Japaigo. I really enjoyed both presentations. And Alice, I had a question for you. Well, sort of a two-part question. And one of them is about, you talked a lot about reproductive health commodities, and I was wondering to what extent you're thinking about RH commodities as being the same or different from maternal health commodities. In some ways they are different, and for example, you talked about a small number of suppliers. And what we saw when we did some of our research was that in some of our maternal health products, there's actually quite a large number of suppliers, like up to 500 suppliers of oxytocin, which I think does change the sort of market dynamics a bit when you think about trying to shape this market. And sort of a follow-on then would be, how would you shape that market? Are you thinking about like providing debt to these manufacturers so that they can go through pre-qualification process and improve their facilities in manufacturing, or how would you envision that working? Thank you very much.
Right. Thanks, Selena. Those are great questions. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, great. So to answer your first question, I think to begin with, we're going to be focusing on reproductive health commodities. And I do note exactly what you said, that sort of the landscapes are different for the various types of commodities. This is something we haven't, we're kind of right at the very beginning, and are working to try to focus the scope a little bit, but I think our initial focus would be on reproductive health commodities. Now, if we find when we get to sort of phase 3 that the concept of trying to put together the investment criteria works in sort of one sector, and that it would be beneficial to try to replicate it in other sectors, then that would certainly be something we would be looking at. So the second question on how to shape the market, in a way that's really going to be left to the impact investors and the suppliers in how they interact with each other. I mean, I think the idea is that, as Beth said, that suppliers are in various stages of readiness for different types of financial interventions. And I think the idea is to try to determine when a supplier is ready for investment, whether that be an equity investment or debt investment from an impact investor. So I think we don't have clear ideas of what the solutions will be yet, and I think they'll be very different for each supplier. And so the idea is to try to come up with sort of a common language that the suppliers and the investors can use when they are talking to each other, and when an investor is determining whether or not it would be useful from its perspective to make an investment in a particular supplier. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jamie, do we have another question?
Yes, we have a question from Peter Hall. So Peter, I'm going to take you off mute. Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you very much. Yep, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, very well.
Okay. Thanks. Two very fascinating presentations. I'd just like to follow up a little bit on Alice's response now and to think of how do we address the market as it is today and the manufacturers as they are today? How do we ensure that putting in an investment doesn't then distort the marketplace? I'm saying that because we've been working for the past 4 or 5 years on our quality of reproductive health medicines program, and we've got a group of manufacturers that have already made significant investments. They've actually upgraded their facilities, they've actually paid that for themselves. They're either have got products recently pre-qualified or they're in the process of getting pre-qualified. And if you then couple that with the fact that when you look at market size for some of the products, you're talking about maybe 3, 4, 5, maximum 6 companies that could supply many of the international needs. So if one comes in and then starts offering companies and organizations investment funding, how does one do that in a fair way, taking into account what has already been done over recent years and how we can address that?
This is Alice. Thanks, Peter, for that. That's a very good question, and this is one of the reasons why. First of all, the first answer to the question is that there would be the point is not to try to be picking winners or to try to be directing investment in any particular area. And one of the things that I mentioned in the presentation is that it's going to be very important for us to be working with you, for example, to see what's already been done and to see, as Beth mentioned, where the gaps are, and to focus on the gaps rather than to focus on, trying to distort the market in any way. So again, these are things that we need to take into account very clearly when we're developing the criteria. And so working, with you and with your organization is going to be very critical for us to do that, because again, the idea is not to distort the market, but the idea is to try to do some things that might smooth the market into working kind of the way it should. And again, we welcome your input. In fact, we'll be looking for it.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting you were going to distort the market. I was just talking about how we could prevent that happening, because really the other thing that has been happening as well is that, and it's not just in this particular class of medicines, is that there are many manufacturers now, or several manufacturers have got pre-qualified their products in different drug types, and they're not getting the orders. So they're starting to question, well, what is the value of going for PQ or even SRA approval if we're not going to get the orders? So there's another facet we'll have to address in this overall picture.
Exactly. I mean, I think it at bottom, what we're hoping will come out of this and some other things too that F4D is doing is really trying to build demand for the quality products at the country level, so that the country procurers are going to be looking for quality, so that when manufacturers take the steps that they have taken in order to be pre-qualified, that there's in fact a market for the products. And I think that one of the ideas is that if there are more quality manufacturers, then that spurs competition, prices will come down, and procurers will be, more interested in buying the quality products at affordable prices. Again, this is all interconnected, and I certainly don't think that we can solve that entire problem through development of investment criteria, but we're hoping that it might be one piece to the puzzle.
It might help. Yeah. Thanks very much, Alice. Jamie, any more questions?
Not at the moment, but there's still plenty of time. Yep, go ahead.
Can I ask a question? Yeah, can I ask a question to Beth? Beth, I really thought it was fascinating what you were telling about the different investors and the investment possibilities, etc. I'm wondering if you approach investors to work with you, to work with the Calvert Foundation and work on your programs, can they choose where their money goes? Can they choose, well, I'm more interested in international global health than in cook stoves, or the other way around? Or even if they say, I want to go for international global health, can they even, if you look at stats 5.9, for instance, can they even point on the grid and say, I would like my money to go to this point or that point, or is it more a broader approach?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think what we found is that most investors do have a very, a pretty specific lens that they take, and it tends to be either a population lens, so they're looking to serve a certain population, so the rural bottom of the pyramid, for example, or they take a disease-focused lens, where they say, we're looking at non-communicable diseases, or we're looking at malaria or TB. And so, one of the things we actually came away from the research, under trying to better understand was, whether or not there's a need for more investors to open their eyes, to open their investment theses a bit to be a bit broader, so that there's more kind of system level money available for this infrastructure investment, investments in better manufacturing, investments in a better, stronger delivery system, investments in, medical training and education. And so, I think that right now most investors do have a specific lens, and that's why it's so important to get us organized, so that we know exactly, who is excited to fund which types of or which parts of the sector. But our hope is that we're also trying to open the eyes of other investors to say, there are needs across each subsector and each disease lens and each population, but there are also broader needs to just build the infrastructure and strengthen the system, and that there needs to be more flexible capital that can do that. And so those are the kinds of conversations we've been having with other investors to really understand their mission and mandate, and how we can organize ourselves to create better solutions.
Okay, thank you. Jamie, are there more questions, or otherwise I have a follow-up one?
Go ahead, Hans. We can do your follow-up.
Okay, I don't think there are questions on the floor right now, but that was a great answer, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. Cannot be too easy, I have to say. I'm wondering, if you are an investor and you want to work with Calvert Foundation, how, for instance, can you, when you talk about education, people want to invest in education, how can you convince them that there's actually a certain, albeit maybe lower, but a certain return on investment in education for them? How do you figure that out for them?
Yeah, so it depends on what kinds of investments they're trying to make, and how they can find either enterprises or intermediaries that can where they can make those investments. And so we won't do all, us at Calvert Foundation won't do all the deal sourcing. But if someone is interested in investing in a certain part of the sector, we can certainly just, what we're trying to do is build a kind of a bigger network of investors and to a better understanding of the full landscape, so that we can then point people in the direction that, point people in a certain direction based on their needs or their kind of capital. And so, this is all pretty new. I'm kind of new to the sector, and I thought this was new just to me, but apparently it's new in general. And so I think one of the findings of our landscaping report, another one of the findings was that organization is lacking. And so we're now trying to figure out how we talk to folks like Aspen Institute, or how we talk to people about how can investors be more coordinated, how can we have a better kind of feedback loop on the opportunities that are out there across the sector, so that we can, with the common goal of just wanting to increase the flow of capital into the sector to make it stronger. And so we're kind of taking the first steps down that path now.
Okay, thank you. Great. We still have time for more questions from the floor, if there are.
Yes,
you can
we
raise
have a
your hand.
question here from Anita from the coalition. I wanted to thank all the speakers. It's great to also have some of the speakers from the first part of the series on the call as well, Deepthi and Selena. But I guess my question is to everyone on the line, everybody who attended this time and or last time, what are some of the gaps that we still see in terms of work that the coalition can do in this space? What additional things can we achieve together, especially when it comes to maternal health supplies and improving the market for maternal health supplies? If we were to take an issue such as quality, do we need to understand better the willingness to pay for higher levels of quality? Alice talked about how, in the beginning there will be an increase in the cost of these products to invest in making them quality assured, but with competition we'll bring it down. How much can we bring it down, and are governments willing to pay for that? Will there always be a procurement bias towards local manufacturers in these countries for cheap products, and how can we overcome that in the market? Do we have answers to these questions, or is that are these places that we need to work on getting more information? I'd love to hear more from anyone on the line. Great, and I think Selena had a comment.
That's great.
Sure, I'm happy to go, or Hans, you can go first. I guess.
No, let me
go ahead.
Go ahead, Selena, and then I'll have an answer. Yes.
Sure. Anita, I think it's a really great question, and it's, I think, a huge issue that a lot of us are talking about is this quality question, and how do we even know? I mean, right now there's a lot of questions about the quality of the maternal health products. We just are lacking a fair amount of information, and there are some studies that have come out, but not enough, and we definitely need more information. And once we have that, it's going to be really important to be talking to the national procurement agencies that are procuring these drugs, and having that information is, in theory, going to incentivize them to be focused much more on quality, because at this point, if they don't know that there's a quality problem, then they can continue their sort of business as usual. But once they know, they may be incentivized to procure more. So I guess I would say that particularly as the work that Financing for Development and the Calvert Foundation, moves forward, we really need to be thinking about how we're shaping these markets and increasing the quality, and sort of related to what Peter said, making sure that we're creating a better marketplace for even when these impact investors leave. So how do we help ministries of health to be able to procure these drugs and make sure that they're going to continue to procure the quality products going forward? So quite a bit of work I think we need to do over this year and next year on this issue.
Okay, thanks, Alina. And Anita, I would like to take the chair's privilege to step in and say something. One of the issues is indeed, are people willing to pay a little bit more for a quality product instead of a little bit less for a low quality product? That's indeed an issue. And even an as important issue is the fact that some big procurers, despite having pre-qualified low-cost products available, are still buying high-cost inventors products, the originator products. And so if you ask me what one of the things that the Suppliers Coalition can do is try to convince in the meetings the big procurers to look at the pre-qualified products and procure those instead of the higher priced products of the innovator company. But okay, but I'm sure there are more suggestions from the floor. So,
I was going to add to that, Hans. I agree with you, and I think that's a very important role for the RHSC. I think on the issues that Selina brought up and Alice was addressing, we're accumulating, and I hope that during this year we have a lot more information on what really is the quality situation on the maternal health drugs. We're accumulating quite a lot of information now on both misoprostol and oxytocin, and we'll have some more to be able to add to the pie over coming months. So I think what we will be able to demonstrate is a very mixed picture around the world. We know there are major problems with some misoprostol products. We know there are problems in some countries with oxytocin products, but not to the same extent in other countries. So we'll need to pull all that together, and I think this is a major discussion which I think, Anita, we need to have at the Suppliers Coalition meeting in Oslo. One of the interesting things, talking to the manufacturers, and I'm in this case I'm only talking about the misoprostol manufacturers, we keep talking about a tablet costing in the area of 15 to 20 cents, and it's in this sort of realm that Selina has based many of her estimates. I'm not seeing any thoughts of jacking up those prices as and when, or if and when, a product becomes pre-qualified. Now, I may be wrong, and that's something we're going to have to monitor very closely, but I'm not seeing necessarily at this point, and particularly if we can ensure competition of 3, 4, 5 companies that are there pre-qualified and going for the market, then I'm not sure that we're going to see a very much higher priced product because it's quality based or as determined by pre-qualification.
That's great news, Peter. Yeah, you're right. Thank you. Jamie, are there other suggestions from the floor?
No.
Or the large audience, I should say.
No, but speak now or forever hold your peace. We have a couple of minutes left if there are any last-minute questions, comments.
Well, this is Anita again. I think that was really helpful to point us in the right direction of where we can take these conversations. Outside of the quality arena, are there other areas for maternal health that we want to move the conversation forward in? I love that we're moving forward with the impact investing and that stream of work is happening. Is there anything else we can do to support these products?
Anita, I feel also in view of the time that we should ask the people to think about your question very hard and send you emails or send you messages on any other way. You're very approachable by email, I know. So I would encourage everybody to really think about what the Reproductive Health Suppliers Coalition can do on the issue of quality and also on other issues regarding the maternal health supplies that we're all very familiar with and very focused on. I want to thank the participants for attending this webinar. I want to thank both Alice and Beth very much for their preparation and their great presentations. And I want to thank the Reproductive Health Suppliers Coalition for opening up this discussion where we look at the financing of maternal health in a totally different way than we are used to. I think that was great. The webinar, I understand, will be posted on the Coalition website because it has been recorded. And with that, I think I can hand over to Jamie to close. Jamie?
Yes, and we will get the webinar and the presentations posted as soon as possible, and we'll send out a notification on the listservs when those are available. And with that, I'd just like to thank everyone. Thank you, Alice and Beth, for your presentations, and Hans for doing a great job moderating. So this wraps up the webinar series, and stay tuned for more information.
Thanks, Jamie.
Yep, thank you.